Hi everyone, I hope that you are doing fine. The summer is approaching and I hope that the weather is also nice and pleasant there you live. Today I would like to talk a bit about an important topic about emotional withdrawal. I encounter this so often in therapy room that I thought that it is important to talk about it. Emotional withdrawal is about disconnection and tendency to distance yourself in relationships. This is an unpleasant response which can manifest in both women and men, but it is usually, very common in men, as many of them may shut down emotionally because they feel themselves as unable to connect with and embrace their emotions due to learned gender roles. You might have heard about the classical complaint by many women about their boyfriends or husbands' little emotional availability and inability to acknowledge their emotional responses and experiences, right? So this should be a global and widespread, marriage-related or relationships challenge. We know that such an issue or challenge can influence relationships negatively and in a profound way, resulting in unpleasant feelings, resentment, disassociation, coldness, misunderstanding, anger, and a negative circle of negative processes in which both persons may suddenly feel that the end of their relationship is approaching. So when there is withdrawal by one person in relationship dynamics, there will be, disconnections and little opportunities to connect and repair and to have intimacy. There will, in other words, more ruptures and traumas and disconnections than intimacy and connectedness. Many of people who withdraw from, emotional space with their partners might be nice and good in doing things, serving, and giving practical support and gifts and so on. So they seem to be very warm-hearted and kind, but they actually have little capacity to embrace their own or acknowledge their partner's unpleasant feelings. So their love language is sometimes rather concrete and not expressed by talking and expressing and dedicating time and emotional presence and closeness. So this lack of emotional connectedness sometimes does not emerge necessarily in the first stages of love relationship, but afterwards through relationships further stages it will be problematic. It will become problematic because throughout further development stages of a relationship there will be a bigger potential for showing and sharing vulnerabilities in the relational spaces, and it is exactly in such spaces which the person may feel fear and get scared and triggered, because vulnerability entails the willingness and wish to and readiness to recognize the painful and unpleasant feelings which literally demand connection and embracement of such emotions. So in other words, the person should be able to see and acknowledge that he has these kinds of feelings in himself and toward the other person, and this may trigger a flight response. So the person will typically find some excuses not to continue staying in that situation, or ask to postpone talking about or solving the problem to a later time, or use some different avoidance strategies. One of the factors that contribute to development of this complex response is cultural values and the way we are raised in our familial and societal context. So in our perception of strength is related to the way we control our emotions and not to show emotional experiences and vulnerability, we will be in trouble in our adult relationships. For many men, connectedness and being honest and open about their true primary feelings, regardless of their character, is associated with weakness and not being good and strong enough as a man. It is not only scary and unacceptable for them, it is also embarrassing for many of them, again due to learned gender roles, stereotypes, social and cultural norms, or previous traumatic experiences and emotional disruptions. So it is not strange that they will unconsciously avoid every single situation where there is emotional confrontation and vulnerability. So they will then withdraw and pull themselves back from the situation. So the function of such strategy, such mechanism, is to protect the person from fear, from shame, from other unpleasant feelings for which the person has a very limited capacity to embrace, to accommodate and manage. I remember that I had a couple in therapy for a few years ago. They had such a problem in their relationship. The lady reported lots of frustration and resentment toward her partner, exactly because of this issue, emotional withdrawal, and his way of managing disagreements and discussions or conversations with a lot of emotional load, which entailed tough and unpleasant emotions. So according to her, his way of managing such conversations was shutting down and displaying lack of responsiveness or even leaving the place. So she said that he left the house or shouted on her to stop, talking about that, or slammed the door suddenly and overreacted several times, since he was not, interested in, talking about that topic or talking about, feelings or such ridiculous things anymore. So this type of reaction, had diminished their communication, their contact, and created an unpleasant feeling of disgust and bitterness and resentment and frustration toward her partner. And for her, this situation was not, endurable anymore, since she was experiencing that she had missed, she has literally lost the man whom she married. So she could not, understand why he could suddenly alter his nice and romantic approach and behavior against her whenever she tried to be honest about her feelings or opinions about some of his behaviors that she perceived as not being totally nice or appropriate or whatsoever, which he did not like to talk about or engage in, mostly topics which addressed his emotional reactions and his feelings. So it was comforting discovery actually for both of them that he withdraws emotionally, and this is not about her personally, but because of his specific way of managing his own feelings when his feelings turned to be unpleasant, and it's not about her. So he could, in the therapy process, acknowledge his issue was also a problem for him prior to marrying his wife, and that he thinks that this came from his childhood, because he came from a very conservative family with little or very limited focus on feelings and vulnerabilities, and focus on talking about tough topics, emotional topics. He remembered that there was not a culture in his family dynamics to process things and talk about difficult topics after an argument or disagreement. And his general expectation after learning was that time will solve everything, and that he could not remember that his parents could ever talk normally about difficult emotions or different ways of perceiving diverse life situations and consequent feelings around these situations together. So in addition, his father passed away due to a chronic illness when my client was about 17 years old, and since then he felt that he should be, the man for his family, and he took responsibility for the family, for his mother and his two sisters, younger sisters. And then he realized that since then, his way of, tackling life and emotional experiences were reducing his meanings and wills and emotional needs, and to hide or escape from his feelings, trying to be present for other people and pleasing others and covering his sister's needs in order to be a strong masculine figure for them. So in other words, he did not have the chance to allow himself to express himself, to be himself, to be connected with his body and his authentic self. And to my understanding, he had developed an avoidant attachment style because he had learned through his life that there is no space for his needs to be taken care of, and also that he had never good, role models who could show him how it is to regulate unpleasant feelings. He noticed that he created an invisible obstacle between himself and his wife, and felt strong resistance for, physical touch and approach and connection with her at the time of discussions and disagreements and arguments. And she noticed that this distance and coldness crept into the other daily life situations, and this was felt as a big loss to her, as I mentioned. So she could really feel that he was not interested in having intimacy and spending time with her, but it was actually, about his feelings of getting overwhelmed and vulnerable, and this knowledge gave her a little relief. So this kind of response is actually a defense mechanism, survival strategy from fight, flight, freeze system, a conditioned freeze-like response, since the brain learned from previous experiences that unpleasant emotions are, just too much or too overwhelming to be processed. Therefore, withdrawal is the coping mechanism of the brain to protect, the person from collapse and overwhelming fear at that moment. So all these protective processes occur in that person's brain, and so the body reacts by rejecting the other person and leaving the situation in order to protect itself from the perceived danger. So an important thing to remember here is that if your partner does this, it is not your fault, and you should take after your feelings, because losing connection and being rejected emotionally, this experience will always hurt and will be experienced as a painful one. So you can not deny your feelings which come after such tough experiences. I mean, frustration and disappointment, sadness you may feel are really important feelings and should not be, interpreted as you being a judgmental or bad person or not understanding person toward your partner. So you cannot deny these feelings. You should also use some time to sit with these feelings, your own emotions, and acknowledge them. And please also remember that, insisting to rebuild this connection, this lost connection immediately, and intensely invite your partner to reconnect, to try to establish a repair, may recreate another withdrawal and trigger more fear in him. So please use time to embrace your own feelings at the first place, and then find proper time to address this issue later when the stress level and tension due to confrontation is not high. For example, when you're connecting during a mutual activity, hobby, or walking together, because this shared sphere of attention will help you to initiate and facilitate the talk more easily afterwards, right? So it will be easier to make it when your partner feels that he is in a judgment-free space, right? Because then the feeling of safety will help him to allow himself to be vulnerable and to practice this skill and start to expressing his emotions, because this is safety in this relational space is very, very important. And clinical experiences show that if you show empathy and genuine interest in seeing your partner's needs, and also to try to formulate your message at least confrontational mode as possible, it will be feasible actually for your partner to lessen his defensiveness and express himself, at least acknowledge his problem and also recognize your feelings. And this will be a gate for constructive change. Of course, professional assistance and couple therapy will be in many cases the best way to come out from such a destructive pattern. I hope that you have found these reflections useful. Please share your experiences on this one and let me know how you have experienced and managed such a thing in your relationship. I believe that many will appreciate knowing that they are not alone, and there are also other people who are struggling with such a challenge, exactly the same problem. So please keep in touch, share, comment, and tune in and interact. I will be grateful. Take care. Bye.